Hello and welcome back to Gript Media. My name is John McGurk. I'm joined by Sarah Ryan for this final special edition of our election podcast series that we've been doing over the course of the campaign. It's an exciting one because the wheels have come off the Fine Gael wagon, the polls are all over the place, and the election, which was boring for so long, suddenly looks like it's starting to get exciting. However, and I hope if you're watching or listening, you'll forgive us this because we want to discuss some sad news first of all, and that is those of you who are close followers of Gript Media may have seen the news over the last few days about the death of our beloved and valued colleague, Mr. Michael Dwyer, who passed away at the weekend unexpectedly after a period of illness. Michael was 56 years old. Those of you who are listening to our sister podcast, The Right Side Ireland, which he co-hosted with Gary Kavanagh, will have been familiar with Michael's incredible generosity of intellect. He was a very smart guy who was willing to share that knowledge and a phenomenal conversationalist. He did immense work here at Gript behind the scenes. He was one of those people who, when you met him or if you listened to him, you always came away having learned something. He's going to be buried tomorrow, Wednesday, in Gorey in County Limerick, Gorey in County Wexford, I should say. And many of us will be there and many of us will be missing him, as we will for many years into the future. And I just didn't want to let the opportunity pass without saying how much we all loved Michael, how much we'll all miss him, and what a valued colleague he was. And Sarah, I know you were very close to him, so you may want to say something.
Yeah, anyone who knows him knows what a loss it was, and anybody who never met him, well, you missed out. He was the best company, the most fun. John, if you went on a night out, he ordered all the wine and was furious if you didn't like his pick. And, really smart, really loyal, really good friend, and I'll miss him forever. That's all I can say, really.
Yeah, and so say all of us. And I think you can see or you can hear that Sarah is very upset, and we all are. So we just wanted to say and let you know what's going on in our lives at the moment. It's been a sad week for us, but we will draw a line under that for now and get back to normal programming because we all have to go and vote in a few days. And up until very recently, going and voting on Friday looked like it was going to be a foregone conclusion. And then all of a sudden, 2 opinion polls were published over the weekend. We had the Irish Times Behaviour and Attitudes poll, and we had a poll from Ireland Thinks, or I believe the Sunday Independent, both of which showed the Fine Gael vote collapsing by 4 points in the case of the Sunday Independent and 5 points in the case of the Irish Times, where the party is now in third place. Sarah, what happened?
What happened? A few things. Firstly, I think that if I was to be fair to Simon Harris, I think he's a little bit a victim of a boring campaign in the sense that it had to be something and here was something, so this is it. But if I was to be unfair to him, which I will be, I think that there's a smugness and an arrogance there in not just him, but in Fine Gael in general, and some of the government, a lot of the government. And I think the mask slipped. And I think that his attitude and the way he behaved in that interaction with the woman, specifically when he was the person who said that he was going to fix scoliosis surgeries and, claims to be an advocate and very proactive about disability services. The kind of dismissive, arrogant attitude that he shows, I think confirmed a suspicion that a lot of voters have. And there it was in its glory. And that's why it's having such an effect.
Yeah, well, the incident you're referring to was with Charlotte Fallon down in Canturk in County Cork, which we've obviously all now seen the video. It's been seen millions and millions of times. I think there's two things. I'll talk about that for in a second, but I don't think that's all it was, because some of these polls were in the Sunday Independent one was definitely in the field, as they say in the business, getting reactions from people before that happened on Friday. And some of the Fine Gael slump and also, by the way, you should always think of a news story. When a news story happens on a Friday, it often takes a few days for the full effects of that to filter through the news cycle. So I think something was afoot before then. And I keep coming back to the Fine Gael manifesto, Sarah. I keep coming back to this rolling out with 60 billion in spending pledges for the next 5 years, and trying to outbid Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin. When I think, and I mean, I don't think this government deserves another term. We wrote an editorial on that at the beginning of the campaign, so I'm not saying here out of any sadness. But I think if they had asked me for my advice, what I would have said to them was, you should be the most conservative financially of all the political parties. You should be the one saying, things might get rough. We need a steady hand on the tiller. We need we can't go mad spending money. We've seen what happens when we do that before. We should be the party of responsibility. And look, the economy's going pretty well. That at least would be a coherent message. Whereas instead, they've tried to pull this trick of like, oh, well, we'll spend loads of money and we're no different to Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin, and vote for us. We have a new energy, but they've no real ideas. And then it's all based around Simon Harris. And then Simon Harris runs into Charlotte Fallon, and Charlotte Fallon accidentally exposes Simon Harris as not always a very nice person and who didn't look like a guy with a lot of new energy. He looked like a tired politician who was too bored to talk to her. And I think when your slogan is a new energy, and you're there kind of giving a woman a limp handshake and running away, I mean, the whole campaign is fatally undermined. Am I thinking too much about it, or like is it not just fundamental?
No, I mean, I think that the campaign was very boring for everyone. The assumption was that Sinn Féin were, and I still think they will, not have a particularly good day. But it was calling out for something. And I think that people were looking for a reason to confidently or comfortably vote for the government, and they haven't gotten it yet. It's not like Fine Gael are gone down 6, but it's not going to Fianna Fáil. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of it's splintering everywhere, because I think people are just very uninspired in general by this entire campaign across the board. But I think they wanted to feel like they were doing the sensible and the sensible thing. Not everyone, obviously, but I think there was a cohort of Fine Gael voter. And the reason why they were doing so well, and the reason why I thought they were going to do well, is because A, I thought they were going to run, a half a decent campaign. B, I didn't expect Simon Harris to politically shit the bed like a week, 2 weeks out. But I think people were looking for a good reason to vote for them, a story around why they were going to vote for stability and, whatever. And it was just never offered. And, I don't often agree with Mary Lou, but I do agree with Mary Lou on that there was an arrogance in, the way that the makeup of government and what the government might look like was being discussed. And there was an entitlement to power there. And people just got the ick.
I think so. I think getting the ick is a good term. And I also think this has been for a while a sort of, I would call it the pox on all your houses campaign. Because I said I don't know whether it was this show or our normal show last week, I said that I did detect a slight move towards sort of independence and away from established parties. And I've seen nothing. I mean, as you say, Fine Gael have had this slump. It hasn't. I mean, Sinn Féin picked up a point or two. Fair enough. Margin of error stuff. The only movement outside the margin of error, the only movement that you can say is definitive movement, is the movement which has gone beyond what the poll regards as its margin of error, which is the Fine Gael slump. That's the one thing both polls agree on. The rest of it is all margin of error stuff. So voters have left Fine Gael, and they haven't necessarily gone anywhere fixed yet. I think a lot of them are looking for a house that isn't one of the three big parties and isn't even one of the established parties, which I think, and we'll come to Aontú in a second, why I think they've been having such a good campaign, why their tails are suddenly up. Too far up, I think, for their own good, by the way, but their tails are up. But I also just detect this wind of change behind independence. Where I am here in Tipperary North, there's a candidate called Jim Ryan, who former Fianna Fáil, are now running as an independent. A lot of energy and a lot of positivity around his campaign at the moment. And you wouldn't have thought that a couple of weeks ago in this 3-seater. Now, I'm not saying he'll win, but I'm saying there's a lot of energy around sort of independence at the moment. And I think that is because people just do not want to vote for this lot. And by this lot, I mean Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, and the rest. And there's a lot of anti-politics sentiment out there at the moment, which no one has managed to capitalise on.
And to be fair, we discussed it the last time, but to be fair to Peadar Tóibín and Aontú, they are laying out something. What is anyone else laying out? They're talking about what they'll do, getting back in, who they will and won't go. Now, I appreciate that some of that is the media asking them questions all the time, but the performances on the debate were lackluster. I mean, Simon Harris is in for the next leaders debate is the night of his political career, because if he doesn't do something pretty good on that debate, I think he's in serious trouble. But
that's tonight, by the way, if you're watching this on Tuesday, that's tonight, that debate on RTE.
But I think that you can be, the circumstances have gone terribly for the government, but I think some of that is born out of their arrogance. At the end of the day, there's a lot of people in Ireland really, really unhappy with a number of things. And at the very least, you owe it to them to discuss and address those things. What are you getting for? I mean, if If the exact same government was voted back in, you're just getting more of the same. Will the Children's Hospital be 20 billion, 30, 40? How many more bike sheds will there be? No acknowledgement of that for the kind of floating, undecided voter. And then, just a campaign that's about energy and like buzzwords and nonsense and, counting up how many TDs. And fair enough. I think at the beginning of the campaign, that's the position Fine Gael were in. The position that Fine Gael were in was that they were going to make some serious gains. Now, based on this week, I mean, if I was Barry Ward or Noel Rock, and this time next week, I was looking at a loss of a seat by about 500 or 600 votes, I think I'd be looking to strangle someone because I think those.
That's
seats,
not exactly. It's not what you said to me on the phone earlier on.
I used a different, more violent term, but I think that like the margins could be tight on some of those second seats, and I think that the leadership and the campaign that they've run will be entirely to blame for that. So,
I just keep going back to all the contradictions in the Fine Gael campaign, which in fairness, some of them only become apparent after the fact, and we're not quite after the fact yet, but we're after the fact of these opinion polls. And I keep coming back to this slogan of a new energy. And what does it tell me? Well, it's a new energy for what? Because what they're proposing is entirely more of the same. So it's basically everything you've had up to now, but harder. With Simon Harris being the one delivering it. I nearly said something much worse. And giving it to you, and not that Leo Varadkar. It's everything you've had up to now, but with a new energy. But the problem is the public don't like what they've been getting up to now. They never have. They haven't liked it for a very long time. Every opinion poll shows that. Government satisfaction in the Irish Times opinion poll today was 35%. So fewer than 4 in 10 people in the country who vote are happy with what the government is doing. And yet the government's campaign is, we'll give you more of the same with a new energy.
And it's worse. It's worse. Some of the most unpopular things that Fine Gael have done have been done by Helen McEntee, and they've decided to put Helen McEntee on a load of their posters. It's completely deluded.
Yeah, well, you know why that was. Somebody in headquarters said, look, we need a woman. We need a woman on the posters. And Helen McEntee is many things, but she's not unattractive. So there's an attractive woman on the posters besides Simon. And it's tokenism. It's like, literally, that was not a political decision. I'm telling you now, putting Helen McEntee on the posters was not a political decision about what appeals to the voters. It was a political decision about what will stop the NGOs from having a go at us. That's what it was.
Okay. But I mean, overall, it's just a series of, it's Simon Harris decided to call on a general election because Sinn Féin were on the back foot, and he thought to himself, this is a good time to do a kind of a smash and grab I'll get myself back into the Taoiseach seat, and Fine Gael are on the uppers. And they didn't really put a lot of thought into their campaign. They haven't engaged with the public. It's been uninspiring. There's no ideas in it. And it's all falling apart with a few days to go. That's the gist of it.
Now, we spent, I guess, 10 minutes giving them a kicking. But I want to move on because I want to give other people a kicking as well, to be fair. Because we've got some blue shirt friends. And I don't want those blue shirt friends who watch our show kind of going, oh, you hate us. We're equal opportunity haters. The Fianna Fáil Sinn Féin campaigns have been equally as terrible. They've been awful. Yeah. I mean, it should be like we say Fine Gael has fallen into third place. We literally mean they have fallen. The other two haven't gotten up off their asses at all. I mean, as I said, Sinn Féin up maybe 2 points, but they're still 5 points down on where they were in 2020. Fianna Fáil, I'm just convinced there's 1 in 5 people in the country who kind of like Micheál Martin has gone to their house and personally hypnotized them. That's the only explanation I have. 20%, no matter what they do, 20% for Fianna Fáil, 20%. Like 1 in 5 people, they could set the country on fire. 1 in 5 people will still vote for them. And I know that includes some of your family members there, as indeed includes some of mine. But, I don't understand what Fianna Fáil have done to deserve that level of support, or what Sinn Féin have done to deserve that level of support, or where those, or what they've been doing to grow it. Because the Fianna Fáil campaign has been amongst the most lackluster I've seen in my life. I couldn't tell you what their message is. Something a bit forward together or something? Forward together into what?
Forward together into the unknown. Well, they're all benefiting from each other's terrible campaign. And, my disagreement with Fianna Fáil has been for a long time, and it's the same in this campaign. It's that kind of like Micheál sits there waiting for somebody else to make a mistake and then just kind of like quietly shuffles into power because, you're just slightly less hated than everybody else. But there's no message. And there's no Darragh O'Brien out the front, Stephen Donnelly out the front. There's no cabinet team that's obvious. Do you know what I mean? Like I see Jack Chambers canvassing with candidates on social media across the board. But at the same time, Jack Chambers has done a couple of media appearances that have been pretty poor. And apart from that, there hasn't really been a cohesive strategy or message for the campaign at all. Obviously, Micheál did the same debate that Simon Harris did. That was okay. I mean, Micheál is a very good, like, strong performer in that regard. But no, I don't think there's a cohesive message either. And I think that the reason why that's not as obvious is because Fine Gael's has been worse.
Yeah, well, I just think the whole lot of them should be fucking ashamed of themselves. And I know you don't like, some people don't like when I use bad language, but sometimes the emphasis is necessary. Because we've got 3 political parties here cumulatively representing 60% of the people, 20% each, 60% of the population. And between them, they've come up with a new energy, forward together, and change starts here. The 3 most insipid slogans I think there's ever been in an Irish general election. They've managed a policy platform that is entirely out of touch with where the public are in a range of issues. They spend forever talking about issues we don't care about. Climate change, Gaza. And I'm sorry, if you're watching this going, I really care about Gaza, fair play to you, but you're 1% of the population. So are the people who care about climate change. Meanwhile, issues that are affecting people's real everyday lives, crime, taxation, the cost of living, barely get a look in. And when they do, it's, we'll invest some more money in some scheme. There's no innovation. It is literally just, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing for the last 5 years. And that includes Sinn Féin in that. We're going to put some slogans on it, put some fresh faces on a poster, say a new energy for the country, fresh new face for your local area, and trust that the public will put up with it. Well, I hope the public say a pox on all your houses. I really do. Because the one campaign that actually has been trying to offer solutions and come up with a relatively centrist, moderate manifesto, so moderate, that gave the game away, the ending is. But Bertie Ahern actually took it and found that Aontú was the party that represented him best. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And in fairness, I know we have both said, full disclosure, we both said we're voting for them. If they were running a shit campaign, I'd say so. But they've actually been running a really, really good campaign, and they're the one party that seems to have been capturing somebody's imagination.
But I think that questionnaire is working really well for them. I said this to you the other day. I was out on Saturday night with a bunch of relatives. I'm not going to get too specific because I don't want to give them away. But all voters, all under 50. And every single one of them had done that online quiz where you figure it, the one that Bertie did. And every single one of them, bar one who always votes for Richard Boyd Barrett, had gotten Aontú. And that's really interesting because it doesn't mean that they're all going to vote Aontú, but it means that Aontú has done a really good job of designing their policy platform to tackle the issues that people really care about. And I think that will pay dividends. I don't think they're going to, get 30 seats or anything, but I think they might do well. I think they could get 7, 8.
I think that's optimistic. I think they do very well to get 3 because, the way the Irish electoral system is designed, and I know you know this, Sarah, but some of our listeners may not, is that if you're on 7% of the vote and you get that evenly across every constituency, you get 7% in every constituency, you're going to be doing very well to take any seats at all. You've got to concentrate your votes around particular candidates. So they do have, I'd say, Patrick being very safe for a seat, plus 3 or 4 others that are maybe in the running. But no one else who I'd say is a solid favourite to take a seat. So I think they're going to have to rely on it really being their day on Friday. But I think it could be. Can I just say one thing to our listeners who sometimes call you and me wusses and are much more hardline and want to see a much more aggressive populist approach to politics? I want to say what Sarah's just said is really important. You've got people on voting apps around the country who are logging on and they're going through and they're putting in their preferences, and Aontú is coming out on top because they're worthy of praise on this. They've crafted a manifesto towards the centre of the electorate, try and appeal and bring voters over to their point of view and say, we're for you. They haven't done the thing some of you who listen to us want to do, which is we're going to have mass deportations now. We're going to shut down the border. We're going to, have mass arrests of people over COVID, all that sort of stuff. because it's emotionally satisfying. It's not going to win you votes, which is why Aontú will do significantly better in this election than the National Alliance will or the Irish Freedom Party will. And not imputing policies to those parties, I'm just saying that's the reality. Politics is a big boy game, and you've got to actually go and win votes to your left as well as to your right. And I think it is to their credit that this campaign has worked very well for them. Independent Ireland, in fairness, have done a similar kind of thing. And I think some people on what I call the populist right in Ireland need to get real. Don't invest your time in running campaigns that don't have a chance of winning. Because you can't win without transfers and appeal to the centre of the electorate in this electoral system we have. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. You just have to recognise the reality of it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I hope we get a broad spectrum of independent people, independent Ireland and independent and nationals. I hope we get loads of people elected in there, because I think it's time for a shake-up. But you have to win. You have to win. There's no point in screaming and roaring and then alienating 95% or 90% of the electorate in your area. You have to win. So, decisions get made by the people who win, not the people who ran the campaign. And if you're knocking around politics long enough, you know that if you look carefully at Fianna Fáil and Labour and the Greens and the Social Democrats, etc., and Sinn Féin, they're all doing that. They're all tapering their message to become, take Sinn Féin, for example. Sinn Féin are afraid to alienate one half of their electorate because they gained a kind of a more middle class kind of voter for a while, and they're afraid of losing them. They straddle multiple different areas and they're terrified of their message. Now that's paralysed them, and I'm not suggesting that. But if you look at parties that are successful, they're successful because they do what you're saying. And people see it as lying and then coming in later, whatever. And in many ways, it is lying. But in other ways, you have to be strategic about things as well. And you have to have something for multiple different types of people, or else you'll get the 5% and that'll be it. And that's the end of it. So
one thing that is bothering me a little bit, I have to say, and now this is premature being bothered, but is the narrative that will be created about this election result if it turns out to be something similar to the Irish Times poll, and Fine Gael really do end up having a very poor day and getting 19%. Now, no one has cast their votes yet. For all we know, Sarah, you and I could be sitting in the RDS on Saturday morning next, and Fine Gael have Simon Harris had the debate of his life, and they're coming on 35%, and it's all over. But if that's not the case, and if these polls hold, the narrative, I think, is very unfortunate, because it will be that Fine Gael were on course to be comfortably returned to power, and then just events happened. He had a bad moment in Cantor. I think the problem is that analysis isn't getting deep enough and isn't looking at the fact that 35% of people in the country are the only people satisfied with the way the country is being run. There was never an eagerness to vote for Fine Gael. People didn't want to be voting for Fine Gael. They just felt that they had no other option. And now Simon Harris has tipped them over into even you aren't an option. So I am a bit concerned that the narrative here, because official Ireland loves telling itself that all of this was predictable and foreseeable. It wasn't. What was predictable and foreseeable was that the electorate don't want to vote for any of you. It's just that they have to put their vote somewhere, and there aren't that many options. So I don't know if I phrased that well, but I'm concerned about the narrative that will emerge.
But I think that there is an injection of drama being put into this by the media a bit as well, in the sense that we're still just tinkering around the edges. What I'm talking about is that Fine Gael aren't going to do as well. So potentially they're going to have less seats than Fianna Fáil, because I reckoned that Fine Gael at the beginning of the campaign were in line to maybe gain about 8 seats, maybe 10, right? And Fianna Fáil were going to lose, I think I said, or win maybe 1 or 2, plus or minus 2 or 3, something like, and that Sinn Féin were going to lose 10, right? 8 to 10. And so now it might be that Fine Gael gain like 3 or 4, Fianna Fáil gain 6 or 7. You know what I mean? Like, it's not really, it's like I said, it's the Noel Rocks and the Barry Wards and those kind of like extra, it's the second seats, it's whatever. But you're still just tinkering around the edges here, John. Like, I don't really see it. And much as the dramatics that I'm seeing online from different journalists, because they're trying to make a boring campaign interesting with this. And okay, in fairness, it has gotten a little bit interesting. But I still don't see a situation where Fine Gael do so badly that Fine Gael are now going into opposition. I just don't see it.
Well, the problem is, I mean, if we can boil this down to brass tacks, the problem is that there are 3 parties roughly evenly divided on 20% each, which make up 60% of the electorate. Which means that mathematically, Sarah, you can't form a government without at least two of them.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. You can't form a government, and the country, presumably, we believe we need a government. For whatever reason, we've decided that we need a government. I mean, the civil service.
We're conceding that much.
Yeah, we're conceding that much. Even though the civil service run most of the departments anyway by themselves and consider ministers an irritation, frankly. But you need two of them. So Fine Gael and Sinn Féin have definitively said they are not going into government with each other, which means that Micheál Martin is in the driver's seat because he can do a deal with either. And he will shamelessly do a deal with either. He will do a deal. I mean, let no be any doubt. The only objective Micheál Martin has at the end of this election campaign will be getting the Taoiseach's office from whoever will give him the longest in it. So he can do a deal with either. And therefore, the next government will either comprise Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin. Those are the options. There is no other option. This idea of a Sinn Féin left-led coalition, bullshit. Not going to happen. Not when 20% of the electorate are voting for independence. That's the thing you have to remember, because if you add Sinn Féin and the smaller left-wing parties up, you only get to about 38-40% in total because of the big chunk of people voting for independence. So those are your options. And you can vote to strengthen one of those three parties, or you can do what Sarah and I are doing, which is to vote to strengthen a smaller party and see what happens.
Well, which would you prefer? Because to mention our dear departed friend Michael Dwyer, he was texting me the other day about a choice in a constituency in Dublin, and what I thought, and he said it's like Sophie's choice, and I said, well, if Sophie's choice was the choice between an excrement sandwich and a piss and excrement sandwich, then yes, that would be like Sophie's choice. Sophie was choosing between her children. They were both, not horrifying choices. But what would you choose what's better? Do you think an opposition led by Fine Gael is good for the country? Because I feel like
go ahead.
I've said many times on the podcast that I feel like we're very, and maybe it's a bit much for me to say this when I wouldn't vote for Sinn Féin in a million years, but I have felt as a voter, as a person living in Ireland, very let down by our opposition. I think our opposition has been unbelievably weak. Obviously, Sinn Féin is the largest party, but across the board, I've just felt it's really weak, and they've kind of togged along behind the government on most things. But I feel that potentially, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, if Fine Gael were to actually get kicked out, Fianna Fáil did the old switcheroo on them and went into government with Sinn Féin, Fine Gael on the front benches of the opposition might be interesting. They might revert back to being a little bit more of the law and order party. They might call the government. I don't know. I'm just asking, would that be better?
So I have two thoughts on this. I tend to agree with your position, but maybe for slightly different reasons. The first thing I think would be good for the country would be for Sinn Féin to go into government at some stage. I personally think they'll be a disaster in government, but I think it would be good for their voters to see them in government. I think it would be good for the rest of us who want their voters to wake up for their voters to see them in government.
Yeah.
I think Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin belong together. They are of the same, and I know this may offend some Fianna Fáilers, but they're basically of the same ideological heritage, nationalist, Republican, just different periods at which they decided to give up the violence, right?
Oh, I can see the comments. I can see the comments bleeding. Go on.
Fianna Fáilers hate when you say that.
Oh, yeah.
Both would regard themselves as centre-left nationalists. I mean, let them do it. But not because I think Fine Gael will be some amazing opposition. I don't think Simon Harris is ever going to lead Fine Gael back to a sort of centre-right position. But because I think the only opportunity for there to be growth on the right is for a lot of votes that are currently sitting with Sinn Féin, because people still have it in their head that they're nationalists and they're for us and they're populists, get woken up. That's the only opportunity for growth of a real alternative in the sort of centre-right space that can put pressure on Fine Gael and bring Irish politics back into some sort of sensible space. Now, I don't relish the possibility of a Sinn Féin Fianna Fáil government, but I think for the health of our democracy in the long term, I think if you've got to pick two of those three to go in together, I would sooner Sinn Féin be in government than be sitting on the opposition benches just copying whatever the government's doing. Is that a good answer?
Do you think that? Do you think that? So I understand that the written within the rules of the Fine Gael party is if they're in government and there's an election and they're no longer in government, there's an automatic leadership contest. Do you think he would survive that?
Oh, I think they'd probably give him a second chance, wouldn't they? They'd say, look, he just had a bad day in Kanturk. And this is what I come back to a few minutes ago. Like, they would make that excuse to be one bad moment caught on camera. The campaign was bad. The people who put the manifesto together were bad. But Simon Harris is still a once-in-a-generation political talent. Let's stick with him for a period in opposition. And he's still very young. I don't see any way that they change the leader. And I also don't see any kind of ready-made alternative there to take over. I mean, Pascal Donoghue maybe, but does he want to lead the opposition after a decade in government? I'm not sure he does. Helen
I doubt it.
Joke. I think they stick with Simon Harris. That's, I think, what they would do. And I think he is ultimately a man of the centre left as well, as the leader of all three parties are. So I don't think that would make a huge difference.
Ultimately, I think that though we're still in a situation where it's going against them, but it's still recoverable if he has a really good debate and they manage to change the narrative in the next few days. Like, many's an election referendum has been massively, dramatically changing in the last week. And I understand it's not looking great at the moment, but I just think that the fact that when you look at those polls, it's not going anywhere obvious. I think that the people who are inclined to move towards Aontú are doing that regardless. But I think capturing back some of the voters that Fine Gael have lost is still to play for in the last few days. And most importantly, I think that this will be a low turnout election. And I think that benefits the government and Fine Gael.
But the only thing I'd say is that almost every constituency has an independent somewhere along the line who's in with a shot at the last seat. Looking at Dublin Rathdown the other day, for example, there's an independent there. Michael Fleming, I think is his name, with a real shot at that last seat if one of the big parties underperform. So I think it could be a bumper day for independents. That's not radical analysis, right? But I just think it's a possibility. But yeah, I just don't see Simon Harris having a great debate with Miriam O'Callaghan tonight in RTE. I just don't see it. I think the other two will gang up on him, and I think they'll go after him, and he'll have to apologise and say, "Oh, sorry." The only mistake they might make is going after him too hard and having all the mammies at home sympathise with Simon Harris and going, "I'll leave him alone." That's the only thing I could say.
I think it was a politically silly thing to do for him to. It sounds like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but I think he leaned into it too much. He's kind of allowed it to be a story. He's gone down, he's wrung the woman, he said sorry. It's kind of expanding it over days because should have just nipped it in the bud right at the beginning and said, yeah, sorry about that. I apologized and try and move on. Instead, we get this kind of narrative of like, well, he's tired from the campaign. Guys, it's a 3-week campaign and he's about 38. Trump has been canvassing for 2 years. But Trump was canvassing for 2 years and he's about 100. And get a grip.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Anyway, like, tired from the campaign. What are you talking about? So, and also, like, I'm tired, you're tired, everyone's tired. No, I don't think it was tiredness. I think the mask slipped. And I think that's why it's resonating with people, because we saw something that people suspect was there, But I just have a feeling that it's such a lackluster campaign. It's so boring. People have not engaged with it at all, that the last couple of days could be interesting.
Well, we'll find out. As I may have mentioned, Sarah and I will be there with you live from the RDS on Saturday morning. Not for the whole day. There will be other Gript people coming in and out of these chairs over the course of the day to keep you up and updated with what's happening at the count. If you want somebody to tune in who isn't RTE and isn't Alison O'Connor, we'll be doing some analysis. That'll be us. We'll be here on this channel for the whole day on Saturday. We'll be back with one more episode on Friday as you're voting to talk about the election and indeed other stuff. But for now, I just think on behalf of Sarah and myself, we want to dedicate this episode of the show to our late friend Michael Dwyer, who meant so much to us. And thank you so much for bearing with us as we were a little bit emotional at the start of the show. At least Sarah was. I am too, just don't show it as much. It's been a very difficult few days, and I'm very grateful to all of you for the kind messages and words of support you've sent us. But until, we'll see you in a few days for our final episode before the election. And until then, thanks so much for watching. Take care.